The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
Today we will discuss a story of a priest and housewife. Three characters stood at the center of this terrible tale. Priest Lucas, a mysterious and endearing priest, Sarah Mitchell, his loving but sometimes lonely wife, and Tom Mitchell, a devout and former Marine. Their once normal lives were entangled in tragedy and deception, leaving a lasting legacy for the quiet community of Meadowbrook. Tom Mitchell and Sarah Mitchell appeared to be the ideal pair. After more than a decade of marriage, they had established a stable and respectful life together. Tom Mitchell was a distinguished ex-Marine who was respected for his integrity and self-control. Sarah Mitchell was a beloved stay-at-home mother who was well-liked for her generosity and involvement in neighborhood events. Their social group revolved on their ostensibly blissful marriage. But underneath this picture-perfect exterior, Sarah Mitchell frequently felt alone. Tom Mitchell spent a lot of time away from home due to his new work. Tom Mitchell traveled a lot for his job as a security consultant for a well-known company, leaving Sarah Mitchell to take care of the two kids and the home by herself. Despite its prestige, his work took up almost all of his time and efforts. Sarah Mitchell's evenings were empty without Tom Mitchell, and her days were full of desire. She kept herself occupied by participating in church and community events, but the hole in her heart got worse every day. The new priest at St. Mary's Church, Priest Lucas, had a contagious personality. Every Sunday, more parishioners attended his passionate sermons. He provided consolation and direction to individuals who confided in him, appearing to comprehend their troubles and secrets. Sarah Mitchell discovered that she was pulled to his captivating presence more and more, finding solace in his companionship and words. She increased her volunteer work at the church in an attempt to make up for Tom Mitchell's absence. Sarah Mitchell and Priest Lucas became closer as Tom Mitchell's absences increased. She discovered a confidant and judgment-free listener in him. Their talks became increasingly intimate and personal. Beneath his kind exterior, Priest Lucas has his own goals and secrets. He took advantage of Sarah Mitchell's weakness to get closer to her. Like many scandals, it started with rumors. Since Meadowbrook was a tiny town, keeping secrets was difficult. Ignoring the increasing intimacy between his wife and the priest, Tom Mitchell concentrated on his rigorous work. He took great pride in his profession, which involved developing security plans for powerful customers and guaranteeing their safety in a dangerous environment. Still, he was blind to the worst danger that was growing within his own walls. As the new parish priest in Meadowbrook, Priest Lucas gained popularity right away. His presence was consoling, his counsel intelligent, and his teachings impassioned. He had a special talent for relating to his parishioners and providing support and direction when they needed it. Sarah Mitchell, who is very devout and committed in the church, was drawn to Priest Lucas because of his warmth and charm. Priest Lucas and Sarah Mitchell's romance started out innocently enough. Because of Tom Mitchell's frequent absences from work and community service, Sarah Mitchell was experiencing emotions of loneliness and turned to the church for support. Priest Lucas, who was usually kind, ended up being her confidant. Their talks became increasingly intimate over time, originally focused on faith and personal challenges. With the priest, Sarah Mitchell experienced a level of understanding and worth she had never experienced with anybody else. Priest Lucas was deeply fascinated by Sarah Mitchell's openness and susceptibility. Not only was she a parishioner, but he also felt himself captivated to her as a woman. They started holding more regular private meetings in the church's tucked-away, peaceful areas. Their responsibilities started to blend together, and an unspoken tension developed between them. Every discreet gaze, every hushed talk, took on an exciting element of risk since it was illegal for a priest to fall in love with a married lady. As their friendship developed, they started to meet outside of churches and pretended to be seeking spiritual advice. Priest Lucas and Sarah Mitchell used to go on long walks together in the country, laughing and sharing secrets during their talks. Their hand contact and the lingering touches that followed sparked great yearning, were the physical manifestation of their immediate emotional connection. Their bodies were crushed together in the darkness as they became engrossed in a passionate romance, their pulses pounding with the excitement of forbidden love. Every covert gathering was infused with the thrill of what they were accomplishing, crossing boundaries and yielding to the strong attraction that united them. The awareness of their affair and the weight of their secret served as a continual reminder of the limits they were crossing. Their forbidden love was all the more seductive because of the stigma surrounding their relationship, which permeated every touch, every word, and every alone time. Sarah Mitchell and Priest Lucas's affair consumed their thoughts and behaviors as it got more intense. They started acting carelessly, meeting in more dangerous places and leaving subliminal messages that alluded to their irresponsibility. Sarah Mitchell started acting quite differently. With Tom Mitchell, her once steady manner changed to one of restlessness and preoccupation, and she became more evasive and aloof. Priest Lucas was also impacted. His lectures became increasingly passionate, as if they were expressing his inner struggle. He battled the shame of what he had done and his promises, but he could not break his bond with Sarah Mitchell. He had never felt such exhilaration and fulfillment as he did during the affair. After being blind to the affair at first, Tom Mitchell began to notice Sarah Mitchell's changes. Something was wrong, judging by her covert phone calls, her late evenings at the church, and her unusual coldness towards him. As his misgivings increased, he started to put together the proof of Sarah Mitchell's treachery. His once steady and predictable world started to fall apart. The neighborhood began whispering as well. In the little hamlet of Meadowbrook, where everyone knew one another's business, the slight differences between Priest Lucas and Sarah Mitchell were observed. The scandalous nature of their connection became the focus of hushed discussions and curious looks as rumors began to circulate like wildfire. The more the affair went on, the darker the reality became. Priest Lucas's past transgressions were not dissimilar. It was discovered that he had deceived other women with false pretenses of spiritual instruction besides Sarah Mitchell. After being seduced by his charisma and charm, a number of additional women came up with their own accounts of having extramarital relationships and meeting in secret. Priest Lucas's connection with Sarah Mitchell took on a menacing tone once his numerous indiscretions were made public. The priest, who was before respected as a cornerstone of the community, was now looked down upon. Priest Lucas was acting with increasing risk and desperation as he tried to keep his secrets hidden at all costs. Priest Lucas did something horrible because he was anxious to maintain his secrets. Regular churchgoer Tom saw Priest Lucas and Sarah Mitchell sharing a kiss in the confessional. Priest Lucas needed to confess, or Tom would tell everyone. Fearful of tarnishing his impeccable reputation, Priest Lucas devised a sinister scheme. He conned Tom into going to speak with him in the bell tower of the church. Priest Lucas had the perfect idea for this peaceful, dark night. High and out of the way stood the tower. Tom became more persistent, his voice increasing with intensity as they stood at the brink. Tom was not aware that Priest Lucas was urging him towards the brink. Priest Lucas gave him a quick, violent shove. Tom lost his footing and his arms flailed, trying to find something to cling onto when his eyes opened wide. However, nothing was present. The sound of his scream pierced the still night as he plummeted. It felt like an eternity until he touched the earth. The awful thump of Tom's corpse reverberated through the darkness. He was covered in blood, his body twisted in strange directions. With his pulse pounding, Priest Lucas peered down from the tower. It was both terrible and relieving to see Tom dead. It was safe for him to keep his secret. He made sure no one observed what had transpired by hurriedly descending the tower. He brought Tom's body to a secret location in the church basement, confident he was alone. He covered the body with items from the abandoned church. Though trembling in his hands, he attempted to act normally, as if nothing had occurred. Priest Lucas continued to celebrate masses with composure. Though Tom's disappearance was noted, it remained unsolved in the absence of a body. While concealing his remorse, Priest Lucas consoled his people. People stopped inquiring about Tom as time went by. Priest Lucas continued his show, offering everyone guidance and hope. Tancios. On the inside, though, he was always anxious and afraid of any sudden noise or shadow. Though aware of the significant danger he was taking, he felt powerless to avoid it. Sarah Mitchell carried on their romance, oblivious to the lethal extent Priest Lucas had gone to. He looked to be carrying a black cloud, which she realized had changed, but he smiled and waved her worries away. He made an effort to persuade himself that he could go on and bury his guilt with Tom. But the burden of his deeds weighed heavily on him, making it harder for him to keep up his front every day. Eventually, the police probe became chilly. There was nothing linking Priest Lucas to the crime, nor were there any leads or suspects. He started to think he'd got away with it. He went on with his life, but that night will always be in his memories. It poisoned every part of his daily life and plagued his dreams. Though he believed he had silenced Tom, his conscience continued to plague him. That's when the moment Tom Mitchell had been waiting for finally materialized. His life with his wife Sarah Mitchell had been based on love, trust, and shared dreams. But lately there has been a cloud over their relationship as Sarah Mitchell grew more withdrawn, frequently lost in her own thoughts, and gone from home on a regular basis. Tom Mitchell, filled with mistrust, decided one cloudy afternoon to follow Sarah Mitchell in order to find out the truth. He followed her to St. Mary's Church, where he witnessed her go into the sanctuary. His pulse thumping with anticipation, he crept inside and crouched behind the altar. Tom Mitchell peered at Sarah Mitchell and Priest Lucas from his hidden perch. Her appearance was fresh and vibrant, and her countenance exuded a joy that Tom Mitchell hadn't witnessed in several months. Priest Lucas, who was well known for his charming and compassionate demeanor, approached her more closely than was proper and touched her arm in a way that made Tom Mitchell quite angry. His worst fears were realized when he saw that his wife and the priest they both trusted were having an affair. Overcome with a mixture of rage and heartache, Tom Mitchell was unable to contain himself. He surprised Priest Lucas and Sarah Mitchell by suddenly emerging from where he had been hidden behind the altar. Sarah Mitchell became pale, and Priest Lucas, who was normally so calm, seemed a little uneasy for a moment. The ensuing altercation was intense and emotionally fraught. As he charged them, Tom Mitchell's voice resounded throughout the church, heralded with betrayal and laced with agony with every word. "How could you subject me to this?" His voice cracked with every syllable as he screamed. "To us? To our household?" Sarah Mitchell faltered, her eyes welling with tears as she struggled to find the right words to express her extreme shock. She attempted to explain, "It's not what you think, Tom Mitchell," but remorse made her words seem hollow. Priest Lucas stepped in and made a peace sign with his palms up, attempting to diffuse the rapidly developing tension. His voice was pleading for Tom Mitchell to understand and forgive, saying, "Tom Mitchell, please listen. This wasn't supposed to happen. It's more complicated than you think." But the betrayal by the two individuals he had trusted the most had filled Tom Mitchell with fury. "Tricky?" Tom Mitchell said, his voice burning with rage. "You've betrayed me, betrayed everything we stand for." His body trembled with uncontrollably angry fists. Tension was high and things were going completely out of control. Enraged beyond control, Tom Mitchell surged at Priest Lucas. Normally calm, the priest felt compelled to defend himself and the terrible secret they shared by acting in a frantic manner. His eyes darted about, searching, until they came across a big, massive crucifix next to the altar. Priest Lucas reached for the cross out of pure instinct. With a terrible thud, the first strike tore open Tom Mitchell's forehead and sent spraying blood everywhere. Driven by rage, Tom Mitchell attacked once more. But Priest Lucas, terrified, swung the crucifix as hard as he could. The blows came faster and harder than the previous, ripping skin and splitting bones. Priest Lucas hit repeatedly, leaving a trail of blood over the altar and reverberating throughout the church. Tom Mitchell lay motionless in a pool of blood, the holy crucifix flowing with blood, as the last crushing blow broke his skull. With Tom Mitchell's blood and pieces of flesh all over them, Priest Lucas's hands trembled. The ground was a glossy red, and Tom Mitchell's body lay in a shattered, gory heap. His face was so crushed by the punches that it was hardly recognizable. The grisly consequences of his last-ditch struggle for existence enveloped the panting priest as he stood over the lifeless body. The fallout was terrifying. As Sarah Mitchell saw the startling descent into violence, she remained still, her heart sunk in grief and fear. Her life was in ruins. It had once been full of love and promise for the future. After the fatal meeting, she fainted next to Tom Mitchell's body, her sobbing echoing through the eerie quiet. Priest Lucas felt the full weight of his deeds as he looked down at his blood-stained hands and his old friend's body. He was overcome with panic and left, leaving a tragic and chaotic scene in his wake. Not only did he manage to flee the actual site, but he also managed to escape the unbearable remorse and impending repercussions of his actions. Police cruisers rushing through the town's small streets, their red and blue lights blazing, broke up the tranquil night. Sarah Mitchell had dialed 911 while in shock and distress, her voice faltering as she described the horrifying image. Priest Lucas left the site of his crime, covered in Tom Mitchell's blood, his heart thumping with shame and panic. It seemed like a labyrinth of peril and treachery, this little hamlet that had once been his haven. News of Tom Mitchell's murder traveled quickly as Meadowbrook saw its first rays of dawn. The police then began searching every hallway in the church, and they were horrified by what they discovered. Tom's corpse was discovered by authorities in a dimly lit part of the cathedral, terribly mangled from a severe fall. It was now known to them that the same individual had sealed the fates of two deadly victims. This horrifying finding dispelled all doubt. Once a man of honor, Priest Lucas was now viewed as a monster. The police searched the whole church for hints, with each secret area disclosing more information about the sinister mysteries it contained. The manhunt then got underway. We have a suspect on the run, all units. Priest Lucas is seen as violent and armed. Over the police radio came the urgent word, "Approach with care." Priest Lucas made his way through the town's back lanes and secret pathways, his thoughts buzzing with ideas for a strategy. He was aware that the cops were almost there. His only hope was to make it to the thick forest on the outskirts of town, where he might get lost and maybe avoid being caught. The manhunt was organized by Detective Carter, a seasoned police officer known for her unwavering pursuit of justice. She utilized her extensive knowledge of Meadowbrook to anticipate Priest Lucas's next action. All significant exits had roadblocks erected, and police searched the surrounding neighborhoods and streets. As Priest Lucas arrived at the town's edge, his pulse raced. A glimpse of hope might be seen in the dark woodland that loomed ahead. He turned to look behind him and heard the faint siren cry and saw the far-off glimmer of police lights. He gave himself one more push and dove into the forest, his thoughts racing with desperation and terror. The dense, bewildering jungle made his movements slower as the underbrush pulled at his clothing. He staggered over rocks and roots, breathing in sharp breaths. He jumped at the sound of every rustling of leaves or snap of a twig, thinking the cops were coming. The truth of what he had done started to consume him, and his thoughts were a jumbled mixture of self-preservation and shame. Detective Carter was gaining ground quickly. Her spotlights piercing the mist of early dawn, she led a group of cops into the woodland. The intensity of the hunt was mixed with the aroma of moist ground and pine. Normally a peaceful location, the woodland felt to Priest Lucas now like a trap closing in. Detective Carter said, "Spread out. He can't have gone far," in a steady, resolute voice. She was aware of their closeness. There was a visible track made of broken branches and disturbed foliage. Eager to capture their prey, the tracking trained dogs yanked on their leashes and growled. As Priest Lucas ventured more into the forest, his strength began to diminish. Thoughts of his horrible crime, guilt, and escape rushed through his head. He couldn't help but think about Sarah Mitchell, the one who had unintentionally started all of these terrible things. The burden of his transgressions became intolerable, and he contemplated carrying out one more, desperate deed to avoid punishment. The sound of police dogs barking suddenly filled the room. Priest Lucas felt a wave of panic rise in him As he realized his time was running short, he started running desperately, but his judgment was impaired by fear and tiredness. As he staggered into a clearing, the police flashlights' blazing rays greeted him. "Freeze! Please raise your hands so we can see them." Detective Carter's strong and forceful voice rang forth. Panting and dejected, Priest Lucas lifted his hands, stained red with blood. The weight of his axe crushed him as he dropped to his knees. He was soon encircled by the cops, who handcuffed him. He felt the cold metal slice into his wrists as they carried him away. It was a physical representation of his guilt. Priest Lucas tried desperately to end his own life in a state of complete despair. He tried to put an end to his suffering by lunging for a sharp rock while the cops were preoccupied. But the cops didn't hesitate to intervene, dragging him back and tightening his restraints. His suffering was exacerbated by his botched suicide attempt. Meadowbrook, a formerly peaceful village, was seeing the dramatic capture of its fallen priest as the sun rose higher in the sky. Priest Lucas was guided away, his terrible axe sealing his own doom. Although the manhunt was over, the community's wounds would not heal for years. When Priest Lucas was brought into detention, remorse and hopelessness clouded his thoughts. The evidence was strong, and the trial proceeded quickly. He received a life sentence without the chance of release. The truth of his predicament dawned on him as he sat in his cell. He was always reminded of his transgressions and the life he had wrecked by the concrete walls and iron bars. Priest Lucas had to deal with his conscience every day while he was incarcerated. The icy truth of his deeds confronted his attempts to find atonement. He was troubled by the other prisoners' murmurs, his alone, and the awareness of the suffering he had brought about. Though he had attempted to evade punishment, he would now have to face it head-on for the rest of his life. Though Priest Lucas's treachery and the sad events that followed were long in the past, the community of Meadowbrook gradually started to mend. The church, which had previously provided comfort, now served as a symbol of the gloom that had momentarily engulfed their community. Priest Lucas was therefore serving his life sentence while being tormented by memories of his past, his botched attempt to flee, and an unceasing reminder of his unavoidable guilt. Was Tom Mitchell ever able to fathom the extent of the treachery that lay ahead of him? Was a tragic conclusion to Sarah Mitchell's quest for comfort inevitable? And Priest Lucas, whose desperate deeds and sinister secrets split a society in two? How can Meadowbrook recover from such extreme destruction? We appreciate you coming along to discover this terrifying story. For more real crime story documentary, visit our channel.
The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
A huge duffel bag was found abandoned on October 17, 2015, in rural Greene County, along a barren section of Highway 12. An old guy contacted 911 after becoming suspicious of the bag. The exceptionally hefty luggage was difficult for them to lift when the responding officer arrived. They opened the bag to continue their investigation, and what they found would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The mixed family with an apparently flawless exterior, the Carter Brown family, was at the center of this catastrophe. November 12, 1982, saw the birth of Michael Carter, a prosperous businessman in his late 40s in Jacksonville, Florida. Michael was brought up in a middle-class home with strong morals and a diligent work ethic. He was raised with a sense of duty and ambition by his parents, who were also his high school sweethearts. Michael had a calm tenacity about him from an early age, which would come in handy for his future pursuits. Michael gained a reputation as a rising star in his industry as he matured and showed off his charm and innate leadership qualities. 6 years ago, he wed Samantha Brown, a stunning and endearing lady in her mid-30s. With their children from past marriages, Michael Carter and his ex-wife, Laura Carter, they had become a close-knit family. Their journey started in 1990, more than 20 years ago, when they were young and full of ambition, pursuing their goals in the fast-paced metropolis of New York. Michael, a rising star in the banking industry, was presenting on investment ideas at a networking event when they first met. Brilliant marketing executive Laura Carter was in the crowd, and was struck right away by Michael's charm and confidence. When they started talking after the presentation, Michael was captivated by Laura Carter's brilliance, originality, and attractiveness. After exchanging phone numbers, they met for dinner at a hip Manhattan restaurant for their first date. They immediately realized they had a passion for business, art, and travel because of their unmistakable connection. As their romance developed, they encouraged each other's professional goals. Thanks to Laura Carter's marketing skills, Michael was able to recruit high-profile clients for his financial firm, which flourished. In the meantime, Laura Carter's marketing company prospered, and she was able to grow it thanks to Michael's financial advice. Together, they created a corporate empire that saw Laura Carter's marketing company win several accolades, and Michael's company rise to prominence in the banking sector. Peers looked up to and revered the golden pair of New York City. Their private lives were similarly prosperous. In the presence of friends, family, and business acquaintances, they tied the knot in a sumptuous ceremony at an opulent Hamptons house. Ethan, their gorgeous son, was the center of their world. But as time went on, gaps in their supposedly flawless relationship started to show. Their marriage suffered as a result of Michael's lengthy work hours and frequent travel, and Laura Carter began to feel abandoned and alone. She immersed herself in her work, but their separation increased. The distance between them grew even though they made an attempt to patch things up. Their talks grew tense and they started fighting more regularly. Their friends and family observed the difference in them, and they were clearly at odds. They got into a heated fight at a charity banquet one fateful night in front of their friends and coworkers. After the confrontation, Laura Carter stormed out of the venue, leaving Michael embarrassed and alone. Michael's discovery that Laura Carter was having an affair with a younger guy, a gifted artist she had met at a gallery opening, dealt the death blow. Michael was horrified to learn of this and came to the conclusion that his marriage could not be saved. With a contentious custody dispute over Ethan, both parties to their nasty and well-publicized divorce battled it out. They ultimately had joint custody, but the harm had already been done. Their hitherto devoted partnership has dissolved in discord and sadness. It was up to Michael to gather up the fragments. His career and personal lives are a complete mess. He immersed himself in his profession, turning to it as a way to escape the hurt of his broken marriage. However, the scars from his divorce never completely went away, and he lived with them for years to come. Soon after their 2006 divorce, Laura Carter's health started to deteriorate quickly. She'd been keeping a terrible secret. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which had aggressively progressed throughout her body, was the diagnosis. A year after their divorce on March 2, 2007, she passed away from the illness in spite of her valiant battle. Even though their ending was turbulent, Michael was astonished and devastated to learn of her dying. He had always loved her, and her passing awakened a range of feelings he had long since repressed. He witnessed the effects of her death on his son, Ethan, who was finding it difficult to deal with his mother's passing when he went to her burial. Michael got to know Samantha Brown in 2008 while working through his loss. Samantha was a friend of a friend and a calm and lovely person. She had lost her spouse in a horrific accident only a few years earlier, leaving her a widow herself. Michael was pulled to her warmth and compassion as they became close through their common experiences of heartbreak and loss. Michael was reluctant to be married again at first, but he soon realized that he was falling in love with Samantha. He was happy to have her back in his life since she made him feel happy and lighthearted again. In 2009, they tied the knot in a private ceremony attended by close friends and relatives. Ethan, Michael's 22-year-old son, was an extroverted and charming young man who had always shared a tight bond with his father. Mia, Samantha's 25-year-old daughter, was a beautiful, vibrant young woman who had taken the family by storm. The Carter Brown family gave the impression of being a devoted and helpful family to strangers. When Mia's lifeless corpse was found bound inside a huge duffel bag and abandoned along the lonesome stretch of Highway 12 in rural Greene County on October 18, 2015, everything changed for the Carter Brown family. The family's flawless facade started to fall apart when the horrifying revelation shocked the little town. Upon examining the murder scene, authorities discovered that Mia's corpse had been severely disfigured exhibiting signs of intense stress and struggle. The once nimble young lady, full of potential and vitality, had met an awful end. The family of Mia was devastated and bewildered to learn of her murder. 2 days prior, Mia had texted her parents to say she was heading off with her boyfriend Ryan and would return the next week. Officer Johnson took up the investigation as soon as the horrifying discovery of Mia's death was discovered. The Carters were being questioned by the police in their house on October 19th. Ethan was the first person to be interviewed. When Ethan was asked if he had a close relationship with his stepsister, the police listened carefully as he opened up about his relationship with Mia. Ethan clarified that he had never felt connected to his stepsister and that Mia wasn't the reason behind it. Instead, it was because he had found it difficult to respect his father's choice to get married again following the death of his mother. He had floated the notion of another lady replacing his mother because he felt a sense of duty to her memory. While Samantha was gone on a business trip, Michael was at home by himself with Ethan when the police spoke with him. Michael said that Mia kept her affairs private and confided in no one, not even her mother. Ethan had stated that he and Mia were not close, but he subsequently disclosed that Mia and Ethan were. Michael characterized their bond as intensely affectionate and sibling-like. Ethan seemed to know more about Mia's life than any other member of the family, he observed. Michael gave an explanation for his whereabouts on the day Mia left the house, saying he was at work starting at 8 in the morning. Until 5 p.m., he made reference to a possible confirmation of his alibi, a noon meeting with coworkers. During their investigation, the police discovered discrepancies in Michael and Ethan's testimony, as well as their divergent interpretations of Mia and Ethan's connection. Through his coworkers, the police were able to verify Michael's alibi, but the inconsistencies in the family members' testimony created more concerns. After conducting an autopsy on Mia's severed body on October 21, 2015, the forensics department sent the police a report detailing their findings. It was discovered that she had been smothered to death prior to being dismembered. The murder weapon was thought to be a large knife, likely a butcher knife, based on the wounds on the body. They looked through the deceased's files. They called the Carters to give their statements at the station since they did not find any significant indication that would have led them to the murderer. They were called on the 22nd. When was the last time Michael saw or spoke with Mia before she left? After giving it some thinking, Michael replied, "I remember coming home early on the 16th, around 2 or 3 p.m., to pick up something I forgot." He had believed that the voice of Mia was coming from Ethan's room. He went on to say that he had knocked on the door but got no answer. He knocked and received no answer, so he assumed everyone was out and didn't give it much thought because the door was locked. As he talked, the cops recorded his statement. Michael then showed them the text she sent him indicating that she was planning to see Ryan. When they inquired about his identity, Michael said that he was Mia's boyfriend. She had never texted him about such things or her previous adventures with him, he said, so he thought it was odd. After questioning him, Ethan provided the police with his address, which they discovered right away, thanks to a fresh lead. Ryan Cooper was taken into custody and interrogated. When they questioned him about why he killed Mia, he denied it, saying that he had no intention of killing someone he had once loved. He continued by saying that they had broken up 2 months ago, which was the last time he had seen her. A week before to the murder, they investigated his activities and verified the alibi he gave for his actions on the 16th, the day the victim departed the house. After they verified it, they released him. The police had now returned to the start. Lead was absent. The deceased person's phone, whose number her stepfather had given them, was located in a garbage pile not far from the site where the corpse had been discovered, so they were unable to track it. After reviewing the case file once again and verifying the statements they had obtained, they decided to concentrate on Ethan, Michael's son. Despite his claims to be distant from the victim, he appeared to know more about her than her stepfather, including specifics about her partner. On October 23rd, 2 police officers paid a visit to the Carter Brown home the next day. Ethan was called into the living room this time and asked where he had been the day the dead had departed the house. Ethan said he spent that day at a friend's house. They questioned Ethan about his activities between 1 p.m. and demanded further information, and 3 p.m. the day. They observed that he paused before replying. In response, he said he had been sleeping at home. He was suspected of lying by the police. They looked through the book, which had his father's written claim that he had knocked on Ethan's door and received no response. They started to go further. Ethan responded to their inquiries. The police chose to get in touch with the people Ethan had given as references in order to conduct a comprehensive investigation of his alibi. But when they contacted these connections, they learned something unexpected. None of them could verify that Ethan was present on the relevant day. To be precise, none of them claimed to have seen Ethan that day, which went against what he had said before. Suspicions were aroused by this fresh information. Therefore, the police proceeded to expand their investigation. In an attempt to obtain further information, they asked to view the CCTV video that was captured by nearby cameras when the Carters were living there. They obtained the tape, watched it closely, and came to an important conclusion. Ethan had driven his father's vehicle out of the complex at approximately 7 o'clock, according to the CCTV footage. October 16th to be exact. An important fact that went against what he had said before. The police started looking into Ethan more after discovering additional information that raised the possibility that he was connected to Mia's disappearance. Serious doubts were raised regarding his involvement, since he had been observed leaving the complex around the time Mia vanished and had used his father's automobile. The police were committed to solving the case and learning the real reason for Mia's disappearance. They immediately asked for a warrant to search Carter Brown House, and on October 24th, that request was granted. When they examined Ethan's room, they were taken aback by what they found. The color of the duffel bag Mia was discovered in was repeated several times. His dresser drawer was searched by them. A slaughtering knife and a pair of gloves were discovered. The knife had a smear of blood on it. Without a doubt, it was the identical one he had used to dismember the victim. After gathering sufficient evidence, they arrested Ethan, who had been observing the entire time, on October 24th. Despite his insistence to the contrary, the police hauled him to their vehicle and took him into the district so they could conduct an investigation. Bloodstains were discovered by the forensics team in his room, and the girl's DNA was located on the pillow he had used to suffocate her. Other items discovered in the room indicated the closeness and intimacy between the two step-siblings. Ethan was forced to admit his guilt when the police presented him with all of the evidence they had, and he started crying uncontrollably. Contrary to what the police would believe, he had not killed Mia on purpose. He had come to really care for her. Their relationship had begun innocently enough, with a consoling moment that developed into more. He said that during a heated phone fight with her boyfriend, Mia had been weeping and her body was shaking the first time they had undressed one another. Since he was the only one in the area, he had gone to console her. Somehow they had found themselves sharing a bed, and their desire to each other had taken over. He went on to say that Mia had shown vulnerability and that he had been captivated to that. Her warm tears felt on his skin as he hugged her tight, and before he realized it, they were sharing a kiss. Even though it was a soft and delicate moment, something deeper within them had been aroused. He went on to say that he had experienced a mixture of exhilaration and shame as they had undressed one another. After all, they were step-siblings, and their parents would never be on board. However, they were unable to resist. Their bodies had been aching for each other's touch, attracting each other like magnets. The initial encounter was both uncomfortable and intense. They had experimented with one another's bodies, revealing fresh cravings and joys. Ethan felt alive, as if he had at last connected with a human being who could relate to him. They have been unable to be apart since then. During family get-togethers, they would steal looks at one another while holding hands beneath the table. They would stealthily move around, seizing intimate moments for kissing and making love. Ethan had never had feelings for somebody to that extent. To keep their secret safe, he had solely spoken lies to the police. He had no intention of killing Mia, nor of causing her any harm. He talked about what had happened that fateful day. Eager to resume their relationship, Mia had arrived to his room. And while she had been convincing, he had been reluctant at first. He'd been excited and scared at the same time as they started to undress, knowing that they may be found out at any time. His heart began to race when he heard the knock on the door. He'd freaked out, thinking his stepmother or father had found them. He had quickly made a choice that would follow him for the rest of his life. Mia's voice was starting to raise an alarm, so he had covered her face with the pillow in an attempt to stifle it. It had done the exact opposite of what he had expected, calming her down. Beneath him, Mia had resisted, her body tensing with panic. However, Ethan had been engrossed in his own fear and failed to observe. He had been still, fearing that he would be found out. Furthermore, he was unaware that Mia had ceased moving. Her dead eyes were looking back at him, but he hadn't noticed them until he'd removed the pillow, assuming all was well. He had been unable to process what had happened and had been in shock. Though it was too late, he had attempted to resuscitate her. Mia had vanished. Then in the room, he had attempted to put her body into one of his duffel bags, but it was too small. Trembling, he took the unimaginable action. Using the kitchen's butchering knife, he dissected her body parts and neatly packed them into his suitcase. Then he took off in his father's second vehicle and abandoned the bag along a lonely section of Highway 12. The minute Ethan confessed, the cops saw that their once pleasurable romance had turned disastrous. While Mrs. Samantha was being held by the police, Mr. Michael was able to visit his son behind bars. The day before, the police had contacted Mrs. Samantha to let her know that her daughter had died. She was restrained by them from gripping her spouse and nudging him with her heels. After viewing her daughter's horrible corpse, which she had seen to be healthy before setting out on her voyage, she had fainted. Amidst the chaos, Michael informed the authorities that he would send his solicitors to secure his son's release, maintaining that his son was not guilty and that he was forced to confess. The Carter Brown incident became well known, and several articles were published denouncing the boy's actions. Some publications claimed that the youngster did it accidentally and just needed a small fine. But because the subject was so delicate, they were flooded with criticism and had to be removed. Many readers kept up with the plot to find out what would happen to Ethan. Ethan appeared in court on November 1st to face his charges. He was given a life sentence after being proven guilty. Michael, Ethan's father, became enraged and yelled at the court. The penalty didn't seem fair to him. Michael was removed from the courtroom by the security personnel. Mia's mother, Samantha, sobbed uncontrollably. She continued to mourn her daughter. With everyone angry and passionate, the courtroom was a chaotic scene. Ethan's actions have resulted in a great deal of anguish. Even though he didn't kill his stepsister on purpose, should he still be punished severely for his crime? While some said that his careless acts still called for a harsh punishment, others thought a lighter term would be more appropriate. Could Michael and Samantha remain cohabit after his son had done such horrible things to her child?
The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
The Martin family, a seemingly normal family from the beach hamlet of Seaview Heights, was at the center of this terrible catastrophe. The worst mistake this family could have made was to welcome a stranger into their home, and the results were disastrous. Lives were destroyed, trust was broken, and most terrifying of all, the offender nearly got away with it without facing any consequences from the police. Seaview Heights was a little town renowned for its serene beaches and stunning lighthouses, but it would soon be rocked by a scandal that would permanently damage the town's reputation. The three beautiful young children that the Martins had, Jack, Olivia, and 3-year-old Pony, were Mr. William, his wife Emma, and a picture-perfect family. But behind the surface of their seemingly perfect life, sinister desires and dark secrets were growing. Rich real estate salesman Harry Williams was well known for his charm and good looks, and his stunning wife Emma, a dedicated teacher, was the epitome of grace and kindness. Her colleagues appreciated her, and her students loved her. To be quite honest, this couple seemed to have it all, a prosperous and happy life, and they resided in a gorgeous home with an ocean view. However, as the pressures of work and family life increased, their marriage started to show signs of weakness. Let me now introduce you to Jessica, a recent Seaview Heights resident and college student, who plays a crucial role in our story. The first time Jessica stepped foot in Seaview Heights was bright and windy. She had been drawn to this town by its beautiful surroundings and peaceful atmosphere. The atmosphere was pure. There was less noise in the streets. All was simply not the same as the busy city life she was used to. Jessica was a college student who was excited to start over in this beautiful town. She had big goals and a defiant attitude. While strolling along the grand boulevards, taking in the charming little shops and historic structures, Jessica once noticed a for sale sign outside an exquisite coastal home. She walked up to the house, curious, wanting to have a closer look. Harry Williams happened to be there conducting a showing for a potential buyer. Mr. Williams strolled up to greet Jessica after noticing her waiting at the gate and exuded his usual charm. Grinning broadly, he asked whether she was interested in the house. Jessica, a little surprised by his sudden approach, got herself together right away. She gushed over the house's beauty and hurriedly said that she was just enjoying the amazing view. Mr. William nodded, his business sense taking over. He introduced himself, telling her he was the buying agent for this transaction. He continued by telling her to feel free to contact out if she ever needed assistance with any of the properties around here. They talked about the town, the house, and Jessica's recent move for a few more minutes. As their conversation developed naturally, Jessica subtly revealed that she was looking for work. She said that since she was new to this little town, no one trusted her enough to offer her a job, despite her desperate search for one. She continued by asking Mr. Martin if he knew of someone who could provide her with a part-time job, if only to help with her college expenses. Something caught Mr. Williams' attention. He thought for a moment before responding. He recalls that Emma, his wife, was constantly looking for assistance around the house and with their kids. He told Jessica that his wife was a school teacher and that sometimes things got a little crazy. Then, offering to speak with his wife and see if they could make plans, he requested for her contact information. Jessica expressed her gratitude to Mr. Martin for taking the time to consider her, her eyes shining with appreciation. Mr. William brought up the topic with Emma later that evening. He told her about how he'd met Jessica and her job over supper. Emma, who is always kind and accommodating, agreed to meet Jessica. Emma suggested that Mr. William invite the young lady over for dinner that weekend to see if she would make a suitable match based on her husband's positive portrayal of her. Jessica was ecstatic to hear from Emma over the phone. After a cordial and pleasant interview, she was hired by the Martins to assist with the kids and help Emma around the house, giving Mr. William and Emma a much-needed break from their busy schedules. Jessica's infectious smile and boundless energy made her an invaluable member of the family straight away. Emma enjoyed the assistance, and the kids loved her. However, Jessica represented something more to Mr. William, something riskier, an escape from the routine of his life. Initially, Mr. William's attraction to Jessica was a humiliating secret that he hardly ever acknowledged, not even to himself. He was struck by her youthful energy and vitality, qualities that he felt were vanishing from both his own wife and himself. For her part, Jessica relished the attention that the attractive and successful Mr. William gave her. His confidence and maturity intrigued her. Compared to the males her age who were gradually attempting to get into her trousers, this was completely different. Did I also mention that Jessica had a toned body and was stunningly beautiful? Their conversation, so harmless at first, gradually became more and more charged with unspoken yearning before you knew it. They both understood that it would happen eventually, and that day came. One sultry summer evening, while Emma was out of town attending a teacher's conference, the romance started. When the kids had gone to bed, the sun had set, and Mr. William and Jessica were left alone in the house. As they lay in the little living room, the sound of the waves breaking on the coast provided a calming backdrop. In passing conversation, they decided to share a bottle of wine. After Mr. William had poured 2 glasses of the deep red wine, they gave each other a light-hearted toast. Light-hearted bantering gave way to more serious conversation as the wine flowed. Jessica started to open up to Mr. William, her charming blue eyes and giggles. She talked about her struggles in school, managing her workload, working part-time jobs, and the pressures of expectations. She described her dreams of a day when she would be able to rise beyond the limitations of her present circumstances and truly do something valuable for herself with an openness and sincerity that greatly affected Mr. William. Mr. William found himself sharing more than usual as a result of the effects of the wine and the private circumstance. He discussed his line of work and how, despite his successes, he was irksomely unsatisfied. His enthusiasm for real estate had vanished, to be replaced by the dull tedium of routine work. He admitted to Jessica that he had lost touch with Emma, the person he had previously admired, who now appeared aloof and preoccupied with her own life and career. The conversation became increasingly private and personal as the evening wore on. Jessica and Mr. Williams' gaze locked more often, lingering just a little too long. The air became heavy with hushed need and taboo ideas. Jessica moved to go closer to Mr. William, her knee grazing his, giving him a shiver. He detected a hint of her perfume, and the soft, flowery scent started to penetrate the air between them. Mr. William was drawn to Jessica because she was a young woman who embodied the qualities he felt he was missing: youth, spontaneity, and an unfulfilled love of life. Their tentative kiss signaled that they were about to cross a line into forbidden area. With caution, Mr. William leaned forward, his heart thumping rapidly in his chest. Yes, they kissed, and Jessica's breath caught as they did. A kiss that revealed so much about their repressed cravings. It was a fleeting, stolen moment, charged with the power of new, forbidden passion. Once one passed the boundary, there was no going back. Their bodies were thrust together as they explored their newfound connection, and the kiss quickly turned into a passionate hug. It seemed as though everything around them vanished, leaving only the two of them in a bubble of unbridled, passionate love. Giving in to a craving that had been simmering under the surface for weeks, they surged for the sofa, hands fumbling, hearts pounding. Driven by a combination of love and a need for something more than what their former lives offered, their romance quickly blossomed. They were engaged in a risky game that offered enjoyment, but also had the potential to destroy all they valued. However, at that very time, neither Jessica nor Mr. William were worried about the consequences. A passion that blazed hotter than the July sun setting over Seaview Heights overcame them. Mr. William and Jessica's covert meetings turned becoming a regular occurrence, with each trip getting them closer to their aim. While Emma was gone, they got to know each other at the house, at motels on the outskirts of town, and even in the tucked-away corners of the fantastic parks in Seaview Heights. Every meeting was a dangerous and sensual experience, the thrill of their secret relationship overpowering the truth of their deception. They became so good at it that Emma didn't realize such a horrible thing was happening in her home. However, even if they were really adept at hiding this, they would eventually run out of time to do so. Jack, their oldest kid, came home early from school one day when Emma was out running errands because he was feeling a little under the weather. He slipped inside the house and went to his room to leave his backpack. He could hear discussions being muffled as he passed the living room. He was curious, so he peered over the corner and saw his father and Jessica sharing a deep embrace. Jack stepped away, shocked and scared, but Jessica noticed him. Her tone belied the anger in her eyes as she shouted out his name in a lovely voice. She asked him to stay for a short while. And what was she going to do? Mr. William must have thought with shame and terrible agony in his eyes. Fearful, Jack stopped, telling her he had to go to his room, and he turned to go right away. Jessica, though, moved more quickly. With an iron-like grasp, she grabbed him by the arm. Her normally gentle and collected demeanor changed to one that was downright frightening this time. With a violent spit, she warned Jack, telling him not to tell anybody about this. If not, and this was the terrible part, she actually threatened to kill him if he told anybody about it. Stunned, Mr. William reached out to touch Jessica, as if to suggest that perhaps she had gone too far. However, she screamed, her act of compassion crumbling. Jack nodded, horror ringing in his eyes. He made an effort to get away, but Jessica's hold grew more firm. She asked Jack to swear to her that he would not speak, and Jack, an innocent child, obediently agreed, tears streaming down his face. Jessica let him go once she was satisfied, and he went to his room. Weeks turned into days, and there was an obvious sense of stress in the home. Emma had a strong feeling that something was really wrong, not just with Mr. William, but also with Jack. He avoided making eye contact and spoke in quiet tones, showing signs of anxiety and distance. Emma's fear increased, but Jack wouldn't open up to her. In the meanwhile, it appeared like Mr. Williams' common-sense light bulb went on when Jessica threatened their child. He started to question whether it was all worthwhile. He began planning and arranging how he would inform his wife about the situation so that they could collaborate to get Jessica out of their lives. He simply couldn't bring himself to do it, though. Emma started to see even more terrible shifts in Mr. William. He grew more and more aloof, his love for her manufactured. Her concerns were aroused by his unexpected business trips and late nights at the workplace, but she chose to dismiss them, blaming his behavior on stress. The whole tragedy didn't come to light until one evening when a loud commotion disturbed the peaceful nighttime atmosphere. With the children gone from Emma's mother's cottage, Mrs. James, a neighbor, went to the Martins' home, her heart pounding. She feared the worst, even though she had no idea what she would find. She was shocked to see something even worse than she had expected. Harry Williams lay still in a puddle of his own blood, his body and eyes vacant. A piercing scream from Mrs. James echoed throughout the neighborhood, and before you knew it, people were flocking to the scene to find out what had occurred. The terror quickly spread across the community, and police and investigators immediately descended on the Martin residence in an attempt to discover the cause of Mr. Williams' untimely demise. Emma had to rush home with the kids that same evening when the police called to alert her that her husband had been the victim of something. She went completely insane because they wouldn't give her any more information. In order to find out what had occurred, she immediately threw her kids in the vehicle and drove for more than 3 hours at an incredibly fast pace. While driving, she kept calling her husband's phone, but nobody answered. She was afraid of worse. Asking Jessica if she knew if anything had occurred, she called her. Jessica said that there was a disturbance outside the house and that she was prevented from entering by the cops. She also disclosed that she had arrived to deal with the disturbance in the community after being out of town that day. When Emma finally arrived, she found her husband's body in a motionless state, with forensics still working to determine the cause of death. She lost it. Why had this occurred? All people loved Mr. William. He was not despised even by those who harbored mild jealousies of his existence. Who would act in such a way? She was given time by the authorities before they asked whether she thought somebody may be responsible for this, but she had no suspicions. Nobody crossed her thoughts. Mr. William was a wonderful husband, father, and nearly perfect man. He was kind but endearing, and he would always provide a hand to those in need. There was not a single individual that she could think of who would try to kill Mr. William. When they questioned Jessica as well, she told them she was out of town since she had an exam to write while shedding a few tears. It came out that Jessica's alibi was confirmed when they called the institution to inquire about her presence for the test. When they asked Jack, the eldest child, if he also knew anything that may lead them to his father's killer, Jack said that he didn't. Jack became even more discouraged because he was already carrying a heavy load from his secret. The sight of his father's death disturbed him, as he had a gut feeling Jessica had to be involved in some way. He was overwhelmed with anger and terror at every glance she gave him, her warning echoing in his mind. He made the decision to confront her because he could take the weight any longer. One evening, Jack found Jessica alone herself in the kitchen while Emma was out trying to cope with the terrible loss that had taken over her life. His heart pounded as he arrived at her, the air heavy with unspoken murmurs. "What made you do it?" Jack growled angrily, a mixture of fear and rage blazing in his eyes. "It was you, I'm sure of it. My dad was slain by you." Jessica's eyes narrowed as her attitude darkened. Jack had no idea what he was talking about, she told him. She spat out, "Jack, be careful with your claims." With his hands clasped at his sides, Jack stepped forward, stronger and more confident than before. He was the one threatening this time. He told her to go, threatening to tell his mother about the affair and everything if she stayed. He was unable to tolerate her. He couldn't stand the sight of her, even if he wasn't sure whether she was genuinely remorseful for his father's death. Jessica's demeanor abruptly changed from predatory to protective. She sprang for Jack, but he slipped out of her reach and dashed through the kitchen door. Driven by a furious yet scared feeling, Jessica grabbed a knife from the kitchen and ran after him, her boots slamming against the wood floor. Jack let out a shout as she approached him, the knife striking his shoulder, but narrowly avoiding his vital organs. The pain was excruciating, but the fear was worse. With blood dripping from his wound, he collapsed to the ground. As his cries reverberated throughout the home, Jessica saw the seriousness of her actions and sprinted out, dropping the knife with a loud clang. Shaken and bleeding, Jack called out for his mother, who hurried outside and rushed to the phone to call for assistance from the police and an ambulance. As they searched for Jessica, the police showed up in an instant, their lights glowing brilliantly on the walls. Meanwhile, Jack was taken to the hospital due to his fast diminishing blood supply. Emma was in a difficult situation, and his life was now in danger. She could not lose her one and only child, but it did not take long for them to find Jessica hiding behind a row of stores in the dark alleyway, tears streaming down her cheeks and her mind racing. Her pretense of innocence was shattered when she was pulled in. After being questioned for a long time, Jessica confessed to killing Mr. William. She described how Mr. William had broken up with her, telling her he couldn't go on and insisting she leave his life in an icy, unfeeling voice. Determined to ensure Jessica would never work at Seaview Heights again, he had made up his mind to tell Emma everything and obtain a restraining order against her. She'd snapped, desperate and enraged. She had used the chance to stab Mr. William, sending the knife smashing into his back as he fell to the ground, while he turned his back and stepped away, allowing her a minute to think. Emma was inconsolable. Her husband's agonizing death served as a mask for the news of his adultery. She only wanted him back, didn't give a damn about the lies, but it was too late. The Martin family had been devastated beyond repair, and the formerly peaceful hamlet of Seaview Heights had been permanently scarred. As Jack healed from his injury, flashbacks of the evening he confronted Jessica tore him apart. He was overcome with intense regret for not speaking up sooner and for not being able to stop his father's passing. Emma, who was struggling to keep her family together, could see how it was affecting him. She tried to reach out to provide consolation, but Jack remained far away, his eyes worried. The neighborhood tried to process the tragedy after learning the horrible facts that had been hiding behind the surface of the picture-perfect family. Once symbols of calm and serenity, the stunning beaches and lighthouses now appeared to be witnesses to the horrific history of murder, treachery, and love that would tarnish their name for all time. Rumors of the Martins' death circulated across the town, and to be honest, amazing was the best word to describe it. Emma felt her grief overtake her. Her once ideal existence fell apart. She was unable to even will herself to be angry with Mr. William for his deception. It was too horrible to lose him. She lost endless hours gazing out at the ocean, its waves crashing in a repetitive pattern that served as a sobering reminder of the life that had once seemed so full of possibilities. Jessica's trial gained attention from the media and became a community center point, drawing curious audiences. Those who witnessed her chilly, meticulous manner on the stand felt their spines tingle. Her voice chillingly distant, she described the events leading up to Mr. Williams' death without showing any regret. Still processing his misfortune, Jack was asked to give a statement. With a faltering but firm voice, he described the horrifying night he had encountered Jessica while standing in front of the court. His evidence painted a terrible picture of Jessica's true character. The jury didn't deliberate long as the trial came to a conclusion before convicting Jessica of first-degree murder. Justice was served to the shattered Martin family by her prompt and severe punishment. Following the incident, Emma, Jack, and her children, ages 3 and 7, found it difficult to reassemble their lives. Emma made the decision to sell the house in the hopes that a new beginning would aid in their recovery, because the once beautiful mansion was now the scene of horrible memories. The wounds persisted even after they ran away from the curious onlookers and murmurs. Seaview Heights, which was forever changed by the disaster, attempted to reclaim its previous grandeur. The narrative of the Martins remained in the air, a cautionary tale of buried secrets and the evil that may lurk behind even the most seemingly perfect lives. Yet the lighthouses and beaches continued to draw tourists.